My unit is Buzz 1000, Future of Business. So it's a core unit for all of the Bachelor of Commerce students. So it's the largest unit in the business school itself for undergrad. So we have 2,000 students per semester. Innovation really comes from diversity in the classroom. It's something we have to remind the students as well about quite often. Because we do get a certain ATAR level, and perhaps because of the reputation of the university, we do attract students from certain areas who know each other because they went to the same schools previously. And what that means is if someone comes in, particularly if they are from a different background, socioeconomic, ethnicity, what have you, they can feel a bit left out. And so what we do in our classes is every class up until week 8 or week 7, we put them into teams randomly. And so the idea is by the time week 7 comes along and they have to work in teams for an assessment, they know everyone in the classroom and they know everyone's skills and weaknesses. And that enables them to see a person beyond the way they look or beyond what school they went to or what brands they're wearing, etc. And we remind them that this person might be speaking English as a second language, but that's an incredibly difficult thing to be able to learn a totally different content, if you like, in a language. And for me personally, my own class, I studied Mandarin in Beijing and Hong Kong, and I always tell my students at the beginning, this is not easy. Can you imagine going to a whole new country by yourself? We do also have to remind them, particularly in some classes, we might get certain more ratio for a gender or a particular degree. So I've had classes before where nearly all my students were Bachelor of Engineering and predominantly males. And that was active work of trying to break them all up and remind them even that, this person might be doing this engineering rather than that engineering, or might be a female rather than a male, but this is the skill they're bringing there. Sense of belonging, or belonging is actually a term I brought in at the beginning of last year with my teaching team and said, this is our culture. This is what we're building in this unit from now on. Because we're a transitioning unit, we set the scene for their entire degree and we are the ones that make them feel like they belong here. And that's, I guess, the importance of that pastoral care element as well. You can't force it. You can't make someone feel like they belong. But it's critical that you have the right people as the face of the unit in terms of the teachers, because if they don't feel like that either within their own teaching team, then they won't feel like they belong. So how will their students feel that way too? With students, I think the most effective thing, even though they don't like it at first, is working with different people every week. And that helps them as well to start going, oh, I have you in this unit as well, or I have you in that unit. And then they start building that friendship network. Because obviously it's their first semester. And for many of them, they have us on Monday of week 1. And they feel lost and overwhelmed and scared. And it's amazing to see how much they come out of their shells as a result of that come week 4 or 5. We have a very diverse teaching team. We have people from all around the world, PhDs, non-PhDs, industry backgrounds, professional academics. And that can also be a challenge in itself because the inconsistency can happen across the classroom as well. So to address these challenges, a key thing, particularly if it's a teaching team, is of course training and investing in your teaching team, as well as hiring the right people. Don't overload them too early in terms of providing them with too many classes too early. You need to see how they actually perform or how the students respond to them. Personally, I brought in our presentation to be live. So previously it used to be pre-recorded. And that allows me to go into different classes across the entire unit to help moderate with the marking, but also I get to see the students and see their relationship with their tutors, because obviously surveys aren't always completely honest, if you like. And that really, really is useful to seeing how can I support the students and also how can I support the tutors more. We also randomly, I like to call it like an open door policy, where I say to my tutors, you're always welcome to come to my class. I'm happy for you to see. But also I will go in, not announced, I will tell them, come in and watch some of their teaching, because I believe it's really important that we get feedback from each other about what we do well and how we can improve. And it's a great way to share with each other strategies of like, oh, did you see what they did there? Did you see how engaged they were? Oh, I'm going to try that in my class. I also, when we have meetings, I always make sure that our teaching team has time at the beginning of the meeting to discuss reflections or discuss something that's working well in their class or not working in their class. I think, as I said, when you've got a big team, you've got to get that teaching team right in order to support the students. One thing we do is we work very closely with one of the university teams to ensure that our actual online content is able to be read by the various systems for people who might be blind or able to have videos that are deaf. So that's something we have to think about quite a lot when we create new video content, that we ensure that the captions are done, they are correct, but also that every now and then to break it up for a viewer, that there is writing content and audio content. The other thing, and we actually did a big survey last semester asking them about the readings, because the tutors had said that they weren't doing the readings. And we asked them what would help you with this, because we knew that with our students, we've got those who from different language backgrounds. This specific unit captures anyone who does Bachelor of Commerce. So sometimes we have Bachelor of Commerce and Bachelor of Engineering students, Med and Commerce students, Arts and Commerce, all over, and Law and Commerce. So some of them really are not, reading is not a big strength, and reading is a key thing within our units. And so we have effectively used essentially generative AI to help us to create key summaries of the readings, key points, which we're currently in the process of making available to students so that if they're feeling overwhelmed, they can just look at that first so they can at least get the key captures from that. So knowledge of our diversity is a key thing I train our tutors on at the beginning or before semester starts. And that's because particularly in semester one, we do have predominantly domestic students, and they have a very different need, if you like, compared to semester two where we have international students, predominantly international students. The domestic students, they often have a good grounding of basic business requirements because at school they've had to do some type of subject in year 11, year 12 on business to get into a Bachelor of Commerce, be it economics or accounting or what have you. But a lot of our international students don't have that at all. And I even had a student last semester who said to me with our first assignment, he said, Jane, I've never written more than 800 words in English ever in my entire background. And he even did school at an international school in Indonesia. And so we actually have inside our unit is an embedded learning support program run by a colleague of mine. And that provides them with core foundation skills in terms of teaching them how to read rubrics and the expectations on how you're marked, writing abilities. They even do in that program reviewing drafts and providing feedback, practice exercises for our final piece as well. And we get feedback from students that this is incredibly useful for them if they're willing to go to it, because it is voluntary for them to do. But I also personally work closely with our student life team, who are the ones that actually welcome the students when they first come, and they do all these events with them and regular catch-ups. And what I've trialled last year is actually doing drop-in sessions before our major assessment just for those students on those specific scholarships so that they could come in a welcoming environment as a group or individually and just ask a question. And we found that was quite useful. Number one tip I would give colleagues or peers in relation to teaching inclusively is don't judge a book by its cover. So I say that to my students too. I look Australian, I sound Australian, I act Australian if you want to put it that way, but I didn't grow up here. So my family's been here for 6 or 7 generations, but my parents were in gas. So I grew up in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands and then moved here when I was 16 due to civil war. And often when I tell them that for students, they also put me in a different box because they think that I'm also a certain type of academic as well. And we work a lot in week 1 to try to make them also realise that we're human. So we share with them our journey to where we are. And one of the things I tell my students on top of that is I failed my first assignment at university. And that's because I didn't know how to reference. because I wasn't educated in Australia. So it was naturally assumed I knew how to reference because of the way that I looked and my name and my passport. And I thankfully had a really nice, very senior professor who pulled me aside and said, I'm not going to report you, but this is what you need to do. And this is who you need to go speak to learn how to do that. And I think it just shows, don't judge a book by its cover. You don't know what your students, what their background is, where they've come from, who they left this morning when they came to class, be it they might have a young baby or they might be caring for their grandmother. Their parents might be struggling financially. They might be a first in family. I share that with my students as well, that I'm the first and only in my family to go to university. I never left. And they're always shocked by that, thinking that I must be someone whose father went to university and grandfather went to university, which is quite commonplace at the sandstone universities. And I think if you don't judge or have that preconception of what that student is like or what their background is, it allows you to be more open, and also enables you to support them more because you don't have the preconceptions. And when I teach, I think back to my own academics when I was at university, and I think back to what did they do that I liked and what did they do that I hated, and I do what I liked about them, and I avoid doing what I hated about those academics that did things such as I never stand behind a lectern. I walk around, engage. I'd never have lecture notes in front of me. And that's because that's what I used to like. I hated sitting there in an international relations lecture for 2 hours with someone reading like this about the United Nations. If you're an expert and you've been in the United Nations, tell me about the United Nations. Show me your passion of helping this world. Don't stand there and read, word for word for word for word. And I share that with my tutors too, as a teaching team. I share it with my students myself. If you don't like something I do, tell me. It's that humane element too, and I say to them, I've learned a language in another culture. I speak really fast. When I get really excited, it just comes out, and you probably don't understand, and that's okay. Stop me. Hey, Jane, can you say it again, please? Jane, can you slow down? Now, that doesn't always work. There'll be comments in the survey at the end saying Jane speaks too fast, but at least I gave them that opportunity, and I constantly will remind them, guys, you got this? Am I okay? And sometimes I'll speak different languages in the class to certain student groups if I know their own language. And that helps them, I guess, almost feel comfortable or go, oh, that's right. She knows a bit more about where I come from. And they just feel like they belong a bit more.